Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's Canadian Nuclear Isotope Council webinar, Coast to Coast Canadian Cyclotron Excellence. As you know, the CNIC hosts a web event almost every month, and our events often feature a conversation with experts about topics like supply chain leadership, radiopharmaceutical development, patient access, investment opportunities, international collaboration, and many more. And through these events, we always try to highlight the leadership and isotope excellence happening here in Canada and showcase where the future of this industry might be going. But when we consider the future of the industry in terms of new applications and opportunities for advancement, we also must recognize the isotope infrastructure and the research facilities that contribute to the foundation for many of our discoveries in this space to date and really continue to actively lead the way in research today. In Canada, our network of cyclotron facilities, right from coast to coast, is such an essential piece of our isotope ecosystem, both in terms of research, but also in the production of a really sizable portion of our country's isotope supply. So today, our webinar, very excited to say, is featuring leaders from that cyclotron community, right from one end of the country all the way to the other, who will be discussing the role they play in the ecosystem and some opportunities to further leverage our cyclotron capacity right to its full potential. We will be taking questions from the audience today throughout the webinar. So if at any point in the event you'd like to ask a question to one of our panelists, please feel free to submit it using the Q&A function. That will help us shape the dialogue with our speakers. I'd like to begin by thanking our esteemed panel of experts today for joining us, and we'll introduce everyone very briefly right before we dive into the discussion. First, from our West Coast, we are joined by Catherine Hayashi, President and CEO of Triumph Innovations, the business interface and commercialization arm of Triumph. She has over 25 years of experience in operational and strategic planning, finance and governance in not-for-profit organizations, public and private companies, startups, and commercialization incubators. Catherine is also the co-lead for the Canadian Medical Isotope Ecosystem, which is such a great ally for the CNIC in much of our work. From the Prairies, please welcome Dale Schick-Martin, Facility General Manager of the Sylvia Fedoruk Canadian Centre for Nuclear Innovation in Saskatchewan. Dale has been in the cyclotron space for over 15 years now, previously with Advanced Cyclotron Systems, supporting the on-site commissioning of 7 different cyclotrons around the world, and joined the Fedoruk Center in 2014. Dale is now responsible for all daily operations at the facility, including maintaining a research-ready state, as well as ensuring production of radiopharmaceuticals for regional hospitals. From Central Canada, we are joined by Dr. Neil Vazdev, Scientific Director and Chief Radiochemist at the Brain Health Imaging Center and the inaugural Director at the Israeli Center for Neuroradiochemistry and at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. He's also a full professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto. And last but not least, from our East Coast, please welcome Dr. Andrew Ross, nuclear medicine physician and diagnostic radiologist at Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Centre in Nova Scotia. He is also a full professor at Dalhousie University in Halifax in the Department of Diagnostic Radiology. He's also the past president of the Canadian Association of Nuclear Medicine, yet another great CNIC industry ally, and chair of their scientific committee. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We've got a lot that we're trying to pack into a very short amount of time, so we're going to get started right away. I'm going to come to you, Catherine, first. Triumph is such a major hub here in Canada, not only for isotope production, but also for research and innovation. Can you please provide an overview of the role that the many cyclotrons at Triumph play in supporting research and development of isotopes, especially new and emerging isotopes that everyone is so excited about?
I'd love to. So you can see behind me, we actually have a graphic of our 520 MeV cyclotron. So this is one of the largest and most powerful cyclotrons in the world. It enables production of rare and complex isotopes that are not easily accessible elsewhere. So for example, we can produce actinium-225 using the large cyclotron. And then we also produce strontium-82, again, a difficult to produce isotope if you don't have a very large cyclotron. We also have a suite of other smaller medical isotope production cyclotrons. We have a TR13 that we use to produce mostly carbon-11 2011 for the UBC research program. And we also have a brand new TR24 cyclotron that's being commissioned even as we speak. And so that is going to be a main feature of our new Institute for Advanced Medical Isotopes. So it's a brand new building that we constructed using support from every level of government and, donors. And it's an incredible project. So the building is built, the cyclotrons installed and now being commissioned, and that commissioning should finish next year. So it was originally designed to meet a technetium gap, but I think we're really excited about the opportunity to use that cyclotron and make it accessible for researchers across Canada to do work in our specially designed incubator labs. So we have 6 labs that are part of the facility as well. So we're really excited to be bringing that to the research and innovation community in Canada. And then I would also mention there are 2 other cyclotrons on site that we operate for our commercialization partner, BWXT Medical, and they use those to produce indium, gallium, and together we produce more than 2 million doses of isotopes for patients around the world. So we're really excited about that infrastructure and happy to kind of bring that to the community. Some of the R&D areas that we're really interested in, as people are always saying, well, what's the new isotopes? What are you guys excited about at Triumph? And I think that is something that we bring is research on the next wave. Some of the isotopes that we're working on developing at IAMI are copper 64 and 67. There's also work being done on alpha and Auger emitters like astatine-211, or more work on actinium-225, broadening the use of actinium. There's also work being done on lead 212 and 203. So I think that's really kind of an exciting time to sort of see what the next wave is going to be. And we always operate through a really collaborative model. Lots of our projects start off as research collaborations and then hopefully evolve into more commercial opportunities. We do supply researchers at hospitals and universities. We're part of a large New Foundations for Research grant where we're going to be supplying medical isotopes to the leading medical isotope researchers in Canada to try and advance their technology projects. And then I guess I would also mention that part of what we do is developing new targets and new radiochemistry. So because we've got kind of a life sciences department as well as an accelerator science department, we're involved in both the development of kind of the production technologies as well as the use of new and emerging isotopes. And we do train a significant number of students that go through the program as well. So we kind of operate on a bunch of different levels in bringing isotope expertise and infrastructure to bear in Canada.
Thanks, Catherine. It's so amazing to me always, the real range of work that's going on at Triumph. I know we're really excited about the Institute for Advanced Medical Isotopes in nearing its final stages of commissioning now, and all the possibilities and the research and innovation that will come from that, leveraging the work that's already going on at Triumph. I want to stick with the topic of research for a moment here, and I'm going to come over to Neil for this next question. Neil, you're here on behalf of CAMH, which for many people, I think outside of this industry, is not necessarily the first place people would think of when they think of cyclotrons or nuclear medicine. But I think CAMH is definitely an under-recognized essential piece of our ecosystem. So can you share a little bit about how CAMH is working to leverage its cyclotron and imaging facilities to help research better understand complex mental illnesses and to advance different treatments?
Sure. So I direct the CAMH Brain Health Imaging Center, which is in the heart of downtown Toronto and on the University of Toronto's campus. Our clinical PET research focuses on making small molecules labeled with short-lived radionuclides. So we don't need such large cyclotrons. We use smaller ones than the one Catherine mentioned, much smaller than 520 MeV at Triumph, because we use 11 to 17 MeV cyclotrons to prepare radionuclides, so the more medical cyclotrons. And the primary radionuclides we make are fluorine 18, which is pretty common amongst most of the medical cyclotrons, but we do a lot of work with carbon 11, which has a 20-minute half-life, nitrogen 13 historically with that, which has a 10-minute half-life, and also oxygen 15 historically, which has a 2-minute half-life. What we're trying to do is put these radionuclides like fluorine 18, carbon, nitrogen, or oxygen into small molecules so we can do brain imaging without, so we're trying to often not perturb the small molecule structure too much, which is why we don't lean on radiometals for our work. And as you said, Melanie, this is not the first place when people think about cyclotrons. When I initially trained in brain PET imaging was as an undergrad and grad student at McMaster in the mid-1990s, and there was only 3 places you could train at the time. At the time, you could only really do this type of work at McMaster, which had been established from the 70s, and then there was McGill and Triumph. And University of Toronto and CAMH were the new kid on the block. They came in the around 92, I think was the first PET scan here. So this center has actually been around for about 35 years. We have over 40 radiopharmaceuticals for brain imaging, and about half of those were developed from bench to bedside. Almost every one of these radiopharmaceuticals was for first in use in Canada, and about half of those were first in use worldwide. Since that time, we also have established manufacturing, particularly over the last few years, and with fluorine 18 being able to be distributed, we make radiopharmaceuticals for clinical trials, and we distribute them all across Ontario by ground or air and to Quebec. And obviously, since that time, those last 35 plus years, we've seen massive growth in small medical cyclotrons. And interestingly, CAMH had the first 2 cyclotrons in Toronto, and now there's at least 4. So it's nice that our site has 2 of the 4. And I remember giving a tour to CNIC, including Melody, a couple years ago, and you had the same reaction as everybody when we give a tour. We give tours all the time, and they always say, wow, this is the best kept secret in town. And I really hope we don't remain a secret. The goal is to be out there doing more with the Canadian community, and we really appreciate CNIC for helping get us on the map in this isotope ecosystem.
Thanks, Neil. Yes, I remember that. I remember that tour very well. That happened to be a day where the cyclotron was cracked, so we were able to peek right into it, and it was such a fascinating opportunity to really learn about the innovation that's happening right here in Toronto. CNIC is primarily based in Toronto, so you're basically in our backyard, and we really want to make sure that we're showcasing the work that's going on that people might not even know about. So that's part of the work that we're doing with events like these to really bring light to those important facilities and that work that's going on. I want to switch gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about research for the first couple of questions, and I want to move on to some conversations about production and how cyclotrons are supporting our isotope supply. So, Dale, I'm going to come to you for this one. The Fedoric Center plays such an important role in central Canada. It is Saskatchewan's sole producer of FDG and supports a lot of diagnostic imaging at many different regional partner hospitals in the area. Can you describe what the day-to-day operations of the facility look like, and especially considering the fact that you are the sole provider in the province and that patients are relying exclusively on the Fedoric Center to power those critical scans?
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction there. I can start off by saying that, yes, the Fedoric Center is, we kind of have our fingers in everything nuclear. And so one of the aspects that we have is this cyclotron facility that we operate in Saskatchewan. It is the only cyclotron in Saskatchewan. And so we do try our best to help out across all of the prairies. So our day-to-day is very much about the resilience of what we can do here on the prairies. We know that there are patients relying on our production every day, and so we have a lot of redundancy. We have an expertly trained team. We've got an excellent team here that come in at 3 in the morning routinely. That's when the shifts start because the hospital needs to have it by 8 a.m. And we do supply backup. We are a backup provider for Calgary, Winnipeg, and Edmonton. And so on days when they need our help, we can start as early as 11 p.m. To get ready to ship that out for them. And yeah, so our systems are largely designed around making sure that we can support those hospitals and that we can really guarantee for them that we can provide that support when we commit to it. So being the only producer here in Saskatchewan, we have cultivated partnerships. We work very closely with our suppliers. Like I said, we've got an excellently trained team, and yeah, so when we produce every day, of course, the fluorine only has a 2-hour half-life, so it will be expired by the end of the day. We have to go through our full quality control, all of our QA controls, making sure that what we produce is appropriate and safe to administer to the patients. And we have a lot of duplicates of equipment to make sure that even if we do encounter a sudden problem, we're able to recover from it. And that goes a long way in helping to make sure that when we do produce, we can really guarantee for people that the drugs will be there for them, and those cancer patients don't have to get rescheduled, because it can be very disruptive. One of the things about having a low population density around the prairies is that there are often patients coming from hours away, and they've dedicated their day to coming, and so we know that if they have to cancel, it's quite tragic and deeply stressful for them. So we are always cognizant of that and really put a priority on it. We do also facilitate research here. We do have users that come in and work with us, advancing kind of that next level of preclinical work that can happen here. We have some small animal scanners, and we support that as well, but it really is always about those patients first, and making sure that we are that reliable supplier on the prairies.
Thanks, Dale. It's so clear from the work that you do that access to cyclotron technologies and working to leverage these technologies to their full potential, while also building that resiliency within the pipeline, is so important. Building on that, Andrew, I'm coming to you next for this. From your perspective, as someone who's been a leader and led efforts to increase Nova Scotia's nuclear medicine capabilities, and now uses the isotopes that are produced at the Queen Elizabeth Cyclotron to support PET imaging for patients across the province in Nova Scotia. How does access to cyclotron technology change the diagnosis and treatment process for your patients? And how does that regional perspective play in when we're talking about increasing the capabilities of a particular province when we think about the cyclotron capabilities?
Yeah, I'm the outlier here, speaking to this from a different standpoint rather than the actual grunt work of producing the things and producing the chemicals that come into the clinics and make all the difference in the world, which is folks in the kind of the back end of the nuclear isotopes chain are so vital, because without them we just don't see it happening. I always, hats off for all the work that everybody does in that. And I guess I get to see, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. And I guess kind of going back on this journey that we took here in Nova Scotia. And when you speak to Nova Scotia, it was Atlantic Canada, because when we first put this system in, we installed in 2008. We were the first province outside of central Canada to get a production facility. I always said that first have-not province outside of central Canada to have access to these things. And so beginning in 2008, we actually had patients from all over Atlantic Canada, and we did that right through until Newfoundland came up in around 2015. So we still do PEI patients and that sort of thing. So watching a real change in terms of the way patients' lives are managed. This is all speaking at this point to FDG back at that time, but of course we now have the gallium tracers coming into thing, and I'll speak about that in a second or two. But the point being that the news was not always good, and this was one of the things that we had to kind of sell when trying to get a $10 million investment from our government, which is what it was at the time, which in today's dollars may not sound like a lot, but certainly back then, looking at Nova Scotia, it was a lot of money to try and front something like this. But just the difference it makes in terms of people being able to understand their disease, be able to make better decisions, having the physicians make better decisions. It's interesting as well when I reflect back that as we go through this, doctors tend to be a relatively conservative bunch. And so in 2008, when we opened the doors to the pet center, I kind of expected them to be blown over, but it took time because people had ways of doing things. And I think, you folks, as you're producing these new things, see this as well. I mean, it takes a long time for what we're seeing going on in the Triumphs and the Fedorics and the CAM-H's get actually out but at the end of the day, it is so vital and so important and makes such a difference to the way people manage their diseases. It's so true. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of speak to was some of the issues that we faced through the years, particularly when we got our own production center, which came online in 2010. Again, there's always, there's so much, the devil's in the details, and just getting the cyclotron up and running and getting FDG out the back end of it didn't actually get it into the patients. We had to run on what was called a CTA, a clinical trial application, for the better part of 5 years. And I remember, and I Health Canada, and it's one of the jeopardies in this whole process of getting patients better treated. I remember one of the people because I was the one who led the CTA applications through, and then the NOC application through from our cyclotron. One of the folks saying, well, why would you bother with an NOC? Just stay on an indefinite CTA. But the cost and the jeopardy that brings to these things is so significant. I can give explicit examples of how difficult that kind of mentality is. So getting a regulatory process that allows what's going on in the back end into patients in a timely manner is so important. And then that allows the docs to kind of, go through their change management and understand things. And so, a typical disease process could take, from the time that you actually get the thing in hand, a good year before the docs actually say, yeah, this is standard of care, even though in the literature it is. It's a very interesting process. And what we did, we opened it, and although gallium is not a cyclotron agent, it can be, and I'm sure you guys are producing gallium, we've done it through a generator. But the reason we were able to do that in Nova Scotia is because we had the experience with positron emitters, and we had the technical capabilities, and we had the skilled folks who could handle and help institute those things. And those are all critical factors in making this function as a clinical program.
Thanks, Andrew. We've got a question in the chat here that I just want to answer, and I think maybe we'll go to Dale first for this one. Someone has asked how cyclotron facilities manage and support their operations when they produce only FDG. Were there any challenges when producing only 1 or 2 isotopes, especially when considering establishing facility stability and funding stability?
That's an excellent question. That's very insightful. Thank you for it. So I can say, yes, there's absolutely a challenge if you have kind of a single drug product that you supply to the hospital, especially if you are in our situation where you've got a single hospital that's there to receive it. The operations of a cyclotron facility are more expensive than you can recover from that single point of operation. So that is a part of why we expand our mandate. That's why we have a TR-24 and not just a very small low energy machine, is that we decided that branching out into the research world would justify a lot of the additional cost, because we know there's going to be that overhead. No matter what you do, you're going to have a cyclotron. You need all of the licensing, you need the vault. There's kind of this real high lowest bar that you craft across. And so we work with the provincial government, the federal government, to make sure that we've got stable funding. We're eternally grateful to Innovation Saskatchewan, who put together a lot of the funding for us, and they do provide a good chunk of our operating fund. And we've worked with Prairies Canada in the past. We even worked with them back when they were Western Economic Diversification to get these projects kind of started so that we could have these capabilities which foster the research, which kind of allow us to be resilient for the patients at the same time, because there's such a cost efficiency to getting even just that little bit more for stability, which allows us to enable all of this research, give all of this capacity to the researchers, the users that come in with their brilliant ideas to push these things forward. And we can be there, trained on doing the FDG, the drug production, all of the quality control, so that we're excellent help for those researchers, in addition to being the supplier for the hospital. So working together with the government, the health region, all of those people who are involved in that, it's a big collaborative team effort to make sure there's enough people on it and enough people feeling responsible so that we do get that very stable funding set up.
Just add one thing to that. Just from the standpoint of having built one of these things in a space, because, and you referred to I think it was Neil referred to how short-lived these things are. When you get into a geographically remote area like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, or the North, or even Saskatchewan, the only opportunity, if you're coming from a major center like Toronto or Montreal, and I mean, we supplied our program here for 2 years out of Montreal. It was via planes. It's the only way you can do it. Very expensive. New Brunswick still does that, and they actually have these private, company things. It's very expensive, very poor reliability. And so when I built the business case for Nova Scotia, it became very clear very quickly that when you put the actual isotope might be $250 a dose, but it triples when you add the plane fare into it. So the actual business case, if you are valuing the test, which was the big thing that we had to sell first, and how that plays into the patient management, it becomes a no-brainer for a cyclotron infrastructure.
Yeah, I'd like to chime into that. These are great points, and I think really there needs to be some kind of a course on the financials of running an imaging center, because these are not transparent things, right? In my first life, I started at CAMH in 2004, and I never knew how things got paid, and it wasn't really my job. But then when I was running, I moved to Massachusetts General Hospital and Harvard Med School, and we used to manufacture FDG there for the clinical doses, just for the hospital alone, and that would pay the bills just for the hospital. So basically, the bills were paid by 6:30 in the morning, and then the rest was clinical research, which brought grant money in, and that's how the center got sustained. Because again, we had enough clinical scanners on site, and we could even distribute and share it. So that's where FDG was a moneymaker. But then I moved back to CAMH in 2017, 18, and for these last few years, we've actually made the business case to not make FDG because it's not worth it for us. We can buy it way cheaper and easier than from Isologic or related commercial sources. But running a center is extremely difficult, because if you look at it, like again, from this hospital's point of view, this center was started in 1989. The budget was $1 million. There was one hot cell, one cyclotron, one chemist, and one scanner. But we've expanded. We have 2 cyclotrons. We have 17 hot cells. We have 2 labs. We have 40 plus tracers. We've got gone from one person that's like 100 plus people when you add students, faculty, and fellows. It's the same $1 million we get without accounting for inflation. So where does all that come from? And then we scan below cost, which is wild, because CIHR and NSERC are really low budget grants, and that's what our investigators have. So we actually heavily subsidize. It's not even close to the true cost of research. So the only way we can realistically sustain this is by taking on industry projects. So we do a lot of work with pharma. We ship and distribute exactly what both Andrew and Dale said. Like, we manufacture for multi-center clinical trials and distribute those. That helps, but we're betting on grant money, and we're really trying our best. The other way that we've done it is through philanthropy. And that was, again, not something you'd ever get in a mental health hospital. There's always too much stigma. Money, like financial, like people will happily donate to a physical illness like heart disease or cancers or things that you can discuss. But historically, there was no donations for mental health. So fortunately, recently, we've had some, and that's really helped us get to the speed. But again, sustaining these programs is tough. And like I said, FDG for us, we would lose even more money than it'd be worth, right? And we can't compete, so we just buy it in when we need it.
So I wanna turn the conversation a little bit here, and recognizing that when we're talking about things like cost stability and funding security, during the current times, it's hard not to consider the geopolitical situation that Canada is facing right now. I'm wondering if our panelists can comment on if they anticipate the current geopolitical landscape and the situation, that if that will have any implications on isotope production and research coming from the cyclotron community. So maybe Catherine, I'll start with you, and then if anyone else wants to chime in, please feel free.
Yeah, it's been interesting times lately, and a couple of very just this week, for example, the previous executive director at Triumph is now in Washington, and he sent me an email saying, "Oh, there's a physicist I'd really like to introduce you to. She's a very talented physicist at one of the leading research universities in a call with her." And it was exactly correct. She's very talented postdoc. She actually has a year left at her postdoc, but she's very interested in leaving the United States and would love to come to Canada and find an opportunity here, which was quite an interesting conversation. And yesterday we had a Triumph board meeting. So the Triumph board meeting has a lot of vice presidents of research from across Canada, from different universities. I was chatting with one of them at the coffee break, and she said, "Oh no, I'm not making any trips to the United States." And she said, "It's not that important for my research, but I'm not going to go." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And then she also said, "I think the real opportunity for Canada is attracting the best and brightest postdocs into positions at Canada." And I said, "Well, I just talked to one, so it's the speed at which these changes are coming. I think a UHN announced that they're going after these postdocs and trying to attract them to Canada. So I think it's just such a remarkable speed of change in how everything works, that we're all just sort of, every week comes with new challenges, but also new opportunities. I don't know if others are sort of hearing and feeling different things, but it was a crazy week. I mean, it's only Wednesday.
I was telling you, I heard it on the common news talking about Canada the UHN hoping to attract significant similar people you were talking to. My hope is, the U.S. is always word I was going to say sucked, but taken so much of the CTA dollars for industry for research on a lot of these very exciting radiopharmaceuticals. And I'm kind of hopeful with what's going on that maybe they've always overlooked Canada, but I mean, we have such great infrastructure that maybe we will see a little bit more of the industry money spill over and help, as you say, Neil, because that's where, that's what helps us a lot with our clinical program delivery. So I don't have any direct evidence of that, but it is if you're trying to look for silver linings, there's one that might come.
That's important. Sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
I'll just also say it was really interesting to see in 2024, one of our spin-off companies, Artemis Products, got acquired by Telix Pharmaceuticals, which is an Australian-based company. But and I guess the worry of government and lots of people is, oh, they're going to buy the technology and then they'll move the 30 people that work at Artemis to somewhere else. And they in fact increased hiring. So now I think they're closer to 50 people in the Vancouver site, and it's becoming increasingly important for them. And in fact, Paul Schaefer, our director of life sciences at Triumph, just left. It's his first week at Telix, and he started there as their chief technology officer. He'll be based here in Vancouver in that position. And I think a lot of that has to do with the talent and infrastructure that Canada has built up. And I think, they're starting to see those opportunities globally as Canada can kind of really play a role in this space.
Hopefully you got a good draft pick from the US to replace Paul.
Oh, we have a strong bench at Triumph.
Absolutely. I mean, recognizing what's going on, I think it's important now more than ever for Canada to really leverage its domestic capacity and strengthen the leadership that we've got and strengthen that supply chain that we have. And kind of building on this conversation that we've now started on workforce development, I think one major key to that supply chain is the workforce capacity that we already have. And when we're thinking about where things are heading in the future and the growth that we're seeing in this space, I'm going to come to Neil for this one in terms of what's needed in the cyclotron community to staff it for the future. CAMH is moving to a different facility, a larger facility, so you must have some insight in terms of what the projected workforce demand is, not just in CAMH, but more broadly. And we know that Canada's isotope supply chain more broadly faces some key difficulties in terms of attracting and retaining talent. So I'm curious if that's the case or how it's different in the cyclotron community in particular.
Yeah, so that's a great question too. And since I started in the field, there's basically been a Canadian and international shortage of people with expertise in all of radiopharmaceutical sciences. So that is going from people who have expertise with cyclotrons or radiochemistry, people who can run a cyclotron and also synthesize radiopharmaceuticals, but also even across the board, across other sciences, including PET physicists and radiobiologists and people who can do imaging sciences and nuclear medicine and radiology physicians who are doing the clinical research. And this is a problem worldwide, and it's been a problem now the entire time I've been in the field. So I think, and as you mentioned, we're moving to this new building. Melody mentioned we're moving in 2027. We're going to have 2 cyclotrons, way more capacity. So we're in the process of actually trying to ramp up our hiring. And I think it's a good problem to have as PhD students and postdocs. And as an advisor, it's nice too, because I haven't been able to retain them for more than 1 to 2 years at most. And they're all getting jobs in the Canadian ecosystem and or internationally. So with the pharmaceutical sector expanding and industry jobs happening, and maybe less and less maybe going to academia, but hopefully more opportunities will come. To Catherine's point, we're actually having a targeted hiring process right now between our hospitals in Toronto to try and actually bring in postdocs and early career scientists. So hopefully that will help. We actually have 2 open positions right now, one for a radiochemist and a cyclotron engineer, and they've been actually very difficult to fill. So again, as a shameless plug, feel free to email me if anyone knows anybody or wants to come here, but it is tough to fill. We've had these positions open for a long time, radiochemists and cyclotron engineers, particularly people who can, in our space, working with carbon-11, fluorine-18, are actually running them. In 2020, I was at right before the pandemic, I was at an IAEA meeting, and we wrote an article about the critical shortage of staffing in this field. And after that, I guess just being in the pandemic, we were all locked up. We wrote that article, we got that out, and then I ended up writing a grant to MyTax at that time. And fortunately, we just got funded last year. So MyTax has given us the largest grant to train radiopharmaceutical scientists specifically, and that can span anything from engineers, physicists, chemists, biologists, physicians even, if they're doing graduate school or postdocs. And we can train 150 years of them. So this is the biggest one they've done outside of NSERC, because it's obvious it's a critical problem in our field that we don't have this, and we've never had this support. It is contingent on industry sponsors. It's a matching grant, but it could be up to $7.5 million. So I'm hoping we can really leverage this with industry partners. We've had this for about a year. We've had many people interested, but no commitment yet. So I'm hoping that industry will pull through in Canada and unleash all these trainees so we can get this Canada-wide training program and fill all this void of highly qualified personnel that we desperately need right now.
It's vital. It's vital from just speaking from the have-not areas or be able to, there was Dr. Jean-Paul Soucy who headed the MNI for years. I got to the point where I was afraid to see him because we poached so many of his staff over the years Halifax, and I mean they were the ones that allowed us to develop, and so it's you folks who can put together, because we don't have the infrastructure to be able to train, but to be able to get a critical body of educators and experience so that we can have those people who can feed these various satellites across the country, because we have the ability to do good stuff. It's just that that we need the leaders to be able to take ownership of that part of it.
Yeah. From our perspective, we've always, well, we kind of out of necessity adapted really great training programs, because we know that whoever's coming in will have their strength and their background, but it won't be familiar with the accelerator side or the biological side or the pharmacy side. So there will always be this gap. So it would be brilliant if we could kind of find candidates who come to our positions and it's just like they can hit the ground running. But we've sort of just come to accept that for working in an accelerator facility, we're going to have to do training. We're going to have to bring people up to speed. And that it won't just be an orientation. It'll be, and here's a nice little pilot project for you to get your feet wet. It's got to take that bend to it. So I think it's great that we've developed these programs, but it is a little sad that we had to.
We've been very fortunate in Halifax. I mean, we've always had a radiopharmaceutical scientist with the background to be able to, although again, the current Antoon Baloo who's our current fellow, who came from, he was one of the radiochemists at MNI, and he's now the leader. He had to develop the leadership skills on site here in Halifax. And what we've done under him at this point is, and we're very fortunate again to have a very good supply of nuclear medicine technologists, because we've actually taken the nukes techs. They understand radioactivity, but they have to learn how to do GMP. They have to learn how to troubleshoot a cyclotron at 5 a.m. in the morning when the beast doesn't want to do what you're wanting it to do. But that's been our kind of mold. But again, we're short of nuke med techs. I mean, we don't have nearly enough to be able to do the volume of clinical work we want to do. So it's a tough situation.
Thanks, everyone. I think there's a question that I see in the Q&A here about how we can encourage additional private sector investment to support this field of activity. And I think things like the MyTax grant that Neil, you were mentioning, I think things like that are the absolute perfect opportunity for the private sector that's looking to support the cyclotron community is to get involved in things like the MyTax grant and to fund some of the training and the development that's going on in this space. So perhaps we'll circle back to that a little bit more later, but changing gears to another question that I see in the chat here. And Dale, maybe I'll come to you on this, just because you mentioned that the Fedoric Center has its fingers in all things nuclear. So wondering if you can comment on some of the advantages versus disadvantages of producing isotopes through cyclotrons compared to research reactors, compared to CANDU power reactors, which is kind of another Canadian strength that we have in the ecosystem here in Canada.
Yeah, I can give kind of a quick overview. I don't have a lot of experience on the reactor side, but I do know that the strength of the reactor side is that they are quite easily able to do a volume. It's fairly straightforward for them to kind of add more targets into their pools to get the activation they need. One of the very interesting kind of physical restrictions around it, though, is that if you look at kind of the chart of the nuclides, it's a bit of a line going up, and then you have more radioactive stuff above and below. And assuming your protons are on the y-axis, then cyclotrons are excellent at producing the things above the line, whereas reactors produce things excellently below the line. We can get clever and do a bit of crossover in certain places, but for the most part, it kind of makes a really nice complementary system where there's an expertise on this side and an expertise on this side, so it can be a little straightforward in how you decide what's the best facility for what you want to make for isotopes. Cyclotrons have a little challenge that they are better at making the short-lived things, because the production pathway is just, it doesn't quite produce the same number of atoms, but the clever ways you can apply a cyclotron are very versatile, and so there's a great flexibility to the way that you can come at your targets with a cyclotron. Reactors, again, they are really good at uh, working with a larger amount of material and making a larger volume. But then they do have to do a lot of planning, and especially when you start talking about power reactors, now you have kind of a cross purpose where really they need to stay active all the time working on their power process. And so introducing isotope production into it can be a bit of a disruption. I know that there are groups out there that are doing great work on finding ways to make the power reactors kind of integrate that isotope without disrupting their other purpose. But I think there was quite a challenge in convincing the management, the administration around those power reactors that, hey, we should take this small risk to sell this really important material. And so yeah, there's kind of benefits and drawbacks on both sides. And I think that the fact that we kind of have that natural split makes us really good kind of allies and much more collaborative than competitive.
Absolutely. I think from our perspective, you need both types of infrastructure. You need both types to produce the entire range of isotopes that we need for all of the different applications, both treatment and diagnostic, that are required in Canada and beyond. So, kind of having those two as partners that work together and play off of each other to ensure we've got that redundant, reliable supply in Canada is a real strength that we have in Canada. We've only got about 10 minutes left in our discussion today, and I've got kind of a couple more questions, but I'm hoping that I can hear from all of our panelists on these last couple of questions. Building off the discussion that was started in the chat about how to get private sector more involved, I'm curious if everyone can take an opportunity to discuss how we can get industry and government on board, and what kind of support is needed to sustain and expand Canada's cyclotron capacity, and really build it so that it's prepared to support the innovation of the future. So, Catherine, I think I'll start with you on this one, and then we can go around the table.
Sure. I mean, I think Canada could really use, and this is something that we learned as part of, the work that we've been doing with the Canadian medical isotope ecosystem is, bringing people together is like the first step, but part of it now is we really need a national strategy that addresses all the different pieces, right? Because we need training, we need infrastructure, we need funding, and we need the ability to attract parties into projects, right? And so how do we do that? And so I think, like, we were talking about how, there's really like a gap in what training is available, and everyone's trying to solve their problem locally, but I wonder if there's an opportunity for Canada to develop sort of an integrated training system, because so much of the training is similar, right? Like the things that you need to work as a nuclear energy worker, the things that you need to know to do GMP, particularly when you're working with radio products, like those are all things that we're all dealing with. So how do we kind of come up with a more streamlined way, rather than us each kind of like building a wheel, like we're all kind of creating our own little regional wheel, and maybe there's a way that we can work together more cooperatively. And I've had a bunch of these conversations, and I think it's just trying to find the time and energy and commitment to make them go further. So, for example, the BC Institute of Technology, which is the main kind of trades training organization in British Columbia, they would love to come up with some kind of training program that serves the needs. And so if they could partner with Algonquin or other research and other training organizations across Canada, where we don't have to come up with 10 different curricula that teach the same thing. Like if we could kind of come up with some standardized training, but then also have it funded, because we're all dealing with, well, how are we going to get this funded? And so I think kind of that ecosystem approach of, we need to figure out how to build in funding sources for new technology development. We need to figure out we're going to do training of technologists and researchers. We need to figure out how we're going to upgrade infrastructure, add new infrastructure strategically in the places in Canada where it's going to make an impact. So I think working on a more national strategy of how we're going to help the regions, and then how we're going to then together have a complete thing for Canada. I think that's sort of the thing that needs to be done. And I think CNIC has a huge role to play in that as well, of like, how do you get the stakeholders together, and how do we work with the leaders in government to actually design and then implement a strategy? Because I think nuclear is just such an area of strength for Canada, that we can leverage this to a real place in the world where we're kind of one of the leaders. And we already have made so many investments in McMaster, Canada's nuclear university, in Chalk River, at Triumph, even in the power reactor infrastructure that's helping us be a leader on those kind of the lutetium production. There's so much more that we could do, but I think having a national coordination of it all would really be helpful.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Our voices are definitely stronger when we're all singing the same tune. So to your point, that's definitely one of the reasons why the CNIC came to be, to bring together all of the different stakeholders right across the supply chain, but also on the academic side and the healthcare side, to bring people together and to align what that messaging is, and work with government to try to advance different priorities. Dale, can I ask you the same question about industry and government supports that are needed in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to echo a lot of what Catherine just said about national strategy. I think the coordination between the different facilities, even not just kind of to make all of the training similar across the country, but to work between the different institutions that are across the country to really take advantage of the synergies we have. I guess one example I can draw from is that in the United States, the DOE has an isotope program that does an excellent job of connecting like the researchers who could use what other producers are making, and that kind of fosters this really good collaboration. I don't think we should take a lot of examples from the US right now, but that's one I think that we should cherry pick. And it's there's a really powerful amount of benefit that we can get out of working together like that, to say, we've got the strength here to do this, but we're kind of lacking here. So maybe if we get this other institution together with us, we can both cover our weaknesses with each other's strengths. And to really coordinate that, I think a group like the CNIC is excellently positioned for that, and I think you guys are on the right path for making more things like that happen. So it's an absolutely great start, but it's definitely something that we need to emphasize more on, that collaboration.
Absolutely. And I know that there's similar programs going on in Europe as well, like the PRISMAP project that is funded by the European Union as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to look at other jurisdictions and see what they're doing well, and bring that back here to improve how things are happening and how we're facilitating that correct collaboration here in Canada. Andrew, I'll go over to you next for this one.
Okay, yeah, you skipped Toronto. Got me off guard a little bit. Just echoing, I mean, as Catherine and I were planning our CANM meeting here in Halifax, and we've got, human resources is one of the big topics that we're putting a session together on, and I may bend your ear on that, but trying to, brainstorm on things. And as I listen, it's more than the session was originally aimed at nuclear medicine technologists, but I think maybe looking a little bit more broad stroke. I mean, one of the things that's been very heartfelt for me over the last 5 years with CNIC, the Bruce, and all that, is to see the renaissance of the Canadian nuclear industry. It's been awesome. I mean, you and I lived through the times when it wasn't quite so, and we became kind of a pariah when Chalk River was shut down, and we went from producing 70% of the world's moly to creating an essential worldwide shortage of the thing. And it was a tough time to live through clinically, I can tell you. I think I'll just kind of change tune just a titch and talk about regulations. Because I think that is one thing that government really can help us with, and if it's something that's near and dear to my heart because I've lived this for the last 2 decades, having to deal with this. I mean, regulators and regulations are for a purpose, but we in the particularly the medical isotope business, it's very tough to get that recognized and the special nature of that. And I think from both sides of it, I remember when we first got our cyclotron here licensed through CNSC, we had the regulator who came down, the inspector who came down had never stepped in a cyclotron facility. They were used to the Bruces, to the, Chalk Rivers and that sort of thing. And it was a tough experience for all involved, I will tell you. That's come a long way. When it comes to actually putting their things into patients, we still got a ways to go with Health Canada. And I mean, we have, the CANM has had a long-standing relationship with them. We had a very good relationship. But the last couple of years have seen a loss of contact. And I really think that in order for Canada to excel and to move this forward, that needs to be rehabbed, and we need to have a real talk about how that works constructively, bringing people like us into the regulators world so they can understand what it is and we can understand them.
Well, and who knows how long it's going to take to get anything through the FDA now. It's just
Oh, that is, yeah. Maybe they don't have to.
yeah, maybe they don't have to.
Maybe like Germany, you just go straight from the hospital lab into the patient.
And Neil, we'll go over to you for the last 2 minutes. You get the last word of the day.
Okay, so yeah, I'll follow Dale's lead on that one about taking examples from the US, but for business specifically, because I think we have the talent, infrastructure, and space to lead the way in nuclear science. So from the private sector, to come back to that question, what we do is we work with pharmaceutical or instrument companies, often to de-risk drug development or commercial apparatus. So it's a clear win-win. With PET, with small molecules, we can figure out the dosing of a drug, the pharmacokinetics. If we label it, we see how it distributes, and we can confirm target engagement. But right now, most of our business, even in Toronto, is all from American pharma companies. And this MyTax grant is really designed for win-win. So if we do think about Canadian companies wanting to get involved in this, we have to put in a proposal where it shows what the trainee would benefit and the institution would benefit from, plus how the company would benefit. So it comes back to Catherine on that integrated training. In terms of the public sector, I think from an academic side, and sort of to, again, follow Dale's point, like the US DOE and has all these mechanisms to make it easier. But right now our NSERC grants and related grants are very, very small compared to the US ones. Like NIH are much larger, at least while it was still in full effect. But tax laws are also another thing, because a lot of the publicly traded companies in Canada in the nuclear science tend to make their companies on the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. So we need to find tax laws and ways for companies to be formed and stay here and not have to do a US exit. And another thing with the NIH is they have these things called small business grants, SBIRs, which are really handy because it encourages a academic to work with a company and make new companies. And also they give money, and they're also designed for more high risk and high gain work. So the risk tolerance, at least in the US historically, has been very high. And I think that's how they've pushed forward a lot more company creation. Sorry to leave the last couple minutes to you guys, but that was my last words.
Thanks, Neil. It's definitely clear that there's a lot going on in this space, but still more work for us all to do together. Recognizing that our time is almost up this morning, I just want to take a brief moment to thank our panelists for sharing your expertise and your insights with us. I learned a lot. I always learn a lot in these webinars, so really appreciate you taking the time to join us. The Cyclotron network is such an important piece of the Canadian ecosystem and the Canadian story, and a strong part of the CNIC as well. So we're really pleased to have had the opportunity to showcase the work that you're all doing. And then with the last minute or so that I've got left, I just wanted to highlight a couple of upcoming events and opportunities to engage with us. For anyone attending the CNA conference next week, CNIC will be there. Please feel free to stop by our booth and pick up some materials and learn about what some more of our members are doing. We're also very proud to be hosting this session as part of the CNA programming this year. Join us on April 17th at 9:45 a.m. on the Boreal stage for a discussion about Canada's isotope supply chain within the broader nuclear isotope context, or broader nuclear industry context. Of course, I also need to mention our Canadian Radiotheranostics Leader Summit, which is just over 2 months away now and approaching very quickly. This conference is jointly hosted by CNIC and a network of leading Canadian academic centres, including CAMH, who we heard from today, in addition to UHN, London Health Sciences, and BC Cancer, in addition to our friends at the Canadian Medical Isotope Ecosystem. Registration is filling up quite quickly, so please be sure to secure your spot today. And lastly, I'm proud to announce that the CNIC will be releasing new episodes of our Isotopes for Hope podcast in the next couple of days. And we're featuring some really exciting speakers for this round, so please check those out. To support this release, we are also announcing a new contest to win a free ticket to the Canadian Radiotheranostics Leaders Summit. Just share your favorite episode of the podcast on social media. We've featured some of the folks that participated on this panel today, so definitely check out their episodes. Tag CNIC on social media and add the hashtag Isotopes for Hope for your chance to win a ticket to the Leader Summit this year. With that, recognizing that we're at 12 o'clock on the dot, I want to thank our panelists again for joining us today and to our audience for your engagement and all of your questions. I hope to see everyone at an event very soon.